This is a technical note on a matter of notation concerning the use of plus or minus signs when you're writing out the sum of forces component-wise in Newton's second law. The sign of a force component only indicates the direction of the force component, whether it points in the positive or negative direction as you defined in the AAA step of our strategy, align your axes with the acceleration. You picked which direction is positive and negative for each axis. You have some freedom to choose how you indicate direction here, but whatever you do must be consistent, clear to you, and clear to the reader. So, an example. Here we've got a pumpkin being pulled by two ropes in two different directions, two different angles here, two different forces of tension, also a force of gravity and a normal force. When you write out the sum of forces in Newton's second law, you've got a couple of options with how you indicate the sign of each of these forces or force components. So, option A. Here we've written each term with a plus sign in front of it. Plus, 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 plus. Here we're operating with an understanding that this term right here, ft1x, is a negative value. That's this component of the tension pointing in the negative x direction. And that this term right here, fgy, it's also a negative value. That's, of course, the y component of gravity, which is the only component of gravity. As an algebraic aside here, this is related to this matter. If a equals 4 and b equals minus 3, then a plus b is 4 plus minus 3 is 1. This is not the same as writing a minus b, because a minus b is 4 minus negative 3 is 7. The point here is the variable b already represents a negative number, so you don't need to put a minus sign in front of b when adding b to a. When you say a plus b, we know that b is already negative. That's what we're doing here if you choose to write it this way. We understand that ft1x, like b, is already a negative number, and this is already a negative number. But we could instead write things differently. Option B here, instead, we're using magnitudes of forces with explicit plus or minus signs in front of each term. So notice the explicit minus signs in front of this term. This is ft1x, this component of tension 1, and the minus sign here in front of the gravity term, mg, the force of gravity, this right there. In this case, the variables ft1 magnitude, ft2 magnitude, and fn magnitude are all vector magnitudes indicated by the line brackets or on bolded or harpooned vector symbols. Those terms and the trig terms, cos theta 1, cos theta 2, sine theta 1, sine theta 2, and these common variables m and g, all of those things are all clearly positive numbers, either by definition or from context. Therefore, since these magnitudes and the sine and cosine terms in mg, since those are all positive numbers, we have to indicate which terms are in the negative direction by inserting manually these minus signs. Inserting manually means you have to write them in to indicate that the term that is pointing in the negative x direction and the term that is pointing in the negative y direction. So two different ways to write this. I strongly recommend using some version of option B, where you put explicit minus signs always in front of terms that point in the negative direction. That's to help you avoid confusing yourself over which variables are supposed to be positive numbers and which are supposed to be negative numbers, and also to indicate with crystal clarity to the reader that you understand which forces or force components point in the negative direction as opposed to the positive direction. So this is my recommendation, explicit minus signs.